Hey, welcome back to another edition of Dealer Confidential. Today, we got a really exciting subject, and that is how to value the dealership. This is going to be an interesting discussion in 30 minutes, Greg, because as you know, valuing a dealership can be complex, and there's lots of little negotiations within the big negotiations. But we're going to get it started, and you can always give us a call offline if you've got a specific question or you need to value a store because we'd love to be able to help you do that. But we'll get started. Thanks again for joining, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Hal. Hello, everybody. Two things, a little bit of housekeeping. We are on YouTube. We're on all the streaming channels. YouTube is our main channel. And we would love when our dealer friends and associates go on, look at our channel, do the podcast. But please subscribe, because what we have is we have a whole series of emails, I should say, emails that we send out. We have letters that we'll send out to you, behind the scenes action, answering a lot of questions that you guys are sending in via email and through YouTube. And again, the only way we can get those out to you is through our newsletter. So please subscribe, and we'll be able to send you out the newsletter, answering a lot of the questions that we're getting right now from some of our listeners and viewers. So that's the easy, best way to have a lot more information given to you in addition to our weekly podcast.
Yeah.
Second question. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, no,
Go
no.
ahead, Greg. I
No,
was just
go
going to
ahead.
say on the YouTube channel too. If you missed a podcast on a subject that may have interested you, you can go back because they're all going to be sitting there in the library for you to access.
Absolutely. Yeah, but we take questions, as you know. You've seen in our podcast, we take questions first thing out of the box. I hit Hal with a good question, and then we go on to our normal podcast of the subject matter. Today, and how I think you summarized it already, I got another email from one of our other dealers in Pennsylvania, and he knew that we were going to be discussing how to value your dealership. And he says, I have no idea how blue sky is calculated and what does it really mean. So I know that that's going to be one of your discussions today, and we'll get into blue sky evaluations and who, what, and where, how it's evaluated. Who does all these evaluations? Who says X number of times? So we'll talk about that today.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
by the way, Blue Sky and Goodwill are the same thing. It's the intangible value of the store, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, ready to go. Let's do it, Hal.
Excellent. Well, let's. There are going to be 5 or 6 key components of the valuation. Let's just jump into the one that's probably the most controversial, or I should say, the most negotiated one is the blue sky, is the goodwill value, and this is going to take longer than 30 minutes. So again, you're going to have to call me on this one or call Greg. But essentially, what we look at is about 4 years of historical cash flow. I say cash flow, it's not net profit, it's an adjusted cash flow, so a recasted cash flow, because there's add backs that we take into account when we look at cash flow. And we look at 4 years because we want to do an average, and we can weight that average, 25, 25, 25, 25, or if it's on a big growth bender, then we may want to do a 50, 40, 30 type of weighting, put more weight on the current years. But it's a recasted cash flow. Things like depreciation, interest on a loan, not floor plan interest. We can't add back that because that's a regular operating expense of the dealership. So we get that cash flow over 4 years, we weight it, and we apply a multiple. And the multiple is based on a lot of different factors. It could be the brand, it could be the geography, it could be the management team, it could be a host of things. There are certain industry recognized pricing guidelines. Hague Partners is one, Kerrigan is one, Dealer Solutions now has a multiple, but those are just starting points. There are adjustments that need to be made, and they're quite frankly based on a lot of experience and comparables for dealerships sold in a particular area on a particular brand.
Right.
So it's a little bit of art and science and a lot of experience that goes into determining the multiple of a dealership. In fact, it's such a rich subject, Greg. We should talk, we should just devote a podcast to the factors that influence a dealership multiple,
Yeah,
right?
why don't we do that? Why don't we do a live broadcast in the next couple of weeks with phone-ins or with special guest speakers, because you're right. This is a subject that a good number of our good experienced car dealers still are up in the air about. Like, how do you get to that number? And there's always, as Hal mentioned before, there's always a X times. So it's one time, two times, three times, whatever. And that's, as Hal pointed out, either earnings or a composite of earnings and everything else. But it's usually an X factor. So let's say some of the as Hal said, some of the hotter brands, Toyotas of the world, the Hondas of the world, BMW, they can go as high as 5, 6 times multiple. That means 5 or 6 times whatever the dealership, as Hal mentioned, is earning in there over a period of time on their financial statements.
Right.
That's how they get to these big, big numbers, because whoever is going to buy this franchise is looking not for tomorrow, they're looking for the future. So they're saying, hey, I'm going to invest $30 million in a franchise, and what's it going to do for me in the next 5 years? So that's where the multiple comes in. The projection is, hey, over the next 5 years, this franchise is going to be worth X. So that's what you have to buy it for today. Now, the other word that you came up with before, Hal, we have blue sky, and the other is
Goodwill.
Goodwill. And that really is the question mark. Again, a couple of dealers asked me about that this week, is what's the difference between blue sky and Goodwill? How is there a difference?
Not really. The terms are used interchangeably. It's again the intangible value of the multiple of the average cash flow, recasted cash flow of the dealership. That's a Goodwill number, blue sky number that we factor into the value of the calculation.
Now, let's go back to last week's podcast, because what we're talking about last week is absolutely key to what we're talking about this week. Cleaning up your financial statements. Make sure they reflect everything that's real, honest, and deserved of your dealership and your franchise. Make sure that the numbers make sense. The finally thing is, make sure that they're numbers that you want to represent in the marketplace to the potential buyer, back to your OEM, back to, more importantly, and we'll talk about this in a second, banks who may be lending you the money to buy this franchise, or anything, partnerships that you want to form, PIs, which are personal investment or private investment companies that may be funding your franchise. These numbers have to make sense. So last week's meeting or last week's podcast, get your financial statement in order. And if you're planning on doing it, I should say selling your franchise next year, and we'd love to talk to you about that, get your financial statement in order this year. It's not, okay, I'll get it done when I'm getting ready to sell the store. No, start getting it done now, because there's a lot of numbers in there. There's a lot of numbers that, Hal, you said last week, they should be in there, and there's a lot of numbers that shouldn't be in there. So let's get them out, get them in, and this way you'll be able to get a fair evaluation of what the franchise is worth. Now, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the franchise, and then next week, I think we're going to be talking about the other missing link to this, and that's the real estate and the purchase of the properties. Two distinctly different packages. Number one, OEMs love that you're in a prime area and a great location, and they're going to love the fact that you're in New York City, you're in Atlanta, you're in one of the major metros, but that has really nothing to do with the multiple. The multiple is strictly based on brand and based on earnings and what you can show and what you can really legitimize, right now.
Absolutely. And let me, to show you how even vehicle segmentation enters into Goodwill. Let's just say everything, all things equal, and you've got a BMW store and a Ford store. Is the Ford store is in Texas is going to be a different value than the Ford store in California, right? Because California is a high luxury market, high import market, and Texas is a strong truck market, okay? And Ford is very strong, as we all know, in trucks, right? So the multiple, all other things being equal, the multiple for a Ford store in Texas is going to be better than the multiple for the Ford store in California, just because of the vehicle segmentation. And it goes the other way too. A BMW store in Los Angeles is going to carry a higher multiple, all things being equal, than a BMW store in Detroit. which is a high domestic market share metro. So again, it comes down to probably getting on the phone or dropping us an email and talking about all of these complexities that do influence the multiple.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll do in this podcast, we'll include some email addresses for you in the actual titles and the subtitles. Our phone numbers are on there. We're available 24/7 for you guys. But we'll also include some emails, and maybe we'll put some emails on the YouTube channel as well, so
Sure.
that you can just jot us a note, and we'll see when we get back to you with some the questions that we've been getting. How have been great, absolutely great, great lead-ins, great everything. So it really
Yeah,
shows that a lot of dealers are looking for, and I use this word very affectionately, assistance.
absolutely. Yep.
It's a crazy world. It's and let me say something. Don't be afraid if you don't know an answer or you have to ask what you consider a silly question. No such thing as a silly question, and no such thing as anybody knowing everything. That's why I have Hal, because he knows everything or pretty close to it. But don't
No,
be afraid to.
I learned something every podcast and every deal, really.
Absolutely. But again, don't be afraid to ask the question that you may seem to be, really not what is considered, hey, expertise, or I'm an expert at automotive. I've owned a dealership for 20 years. I should know everything. No, you shouldn't know everything because
Yeah,
it's a very, very complex business, very complex. And as Hal said, he and I, after 40 years each of running dealerships and OEMs and everything, we learn every
absolutely.
single day.
Yeah. Yeah. No deal's the same. No seller or buyer is the same. So
Yeah. So
so
yeah,
that we
let's get
spent a
into
lot
some
of
of the
time
other
on.
things. Yeah, let's get into, you mentioned before we got four, well, we did one, we did the Blue Sky and Goodwill, and we got four other things that we need to touch upon today's
Yeah.
program.
Yeah, so the next one is parts inventory. And this one is typically you go a couple different ways. It could be an appraised negotiated value of parts. Typically, though, it's the current OEM parts catalog pricing for parts that have sold in the last 12 months. So it's got to be a an active part. It's got to be a vital part, one that's moving. The old parts that sit, the 1975 Ford Maverick front bumper is probably not going to be included in the parts account. Okay. I mean, there's probably one person out there looking for a 1975 Ford Maverick bumper, but it won't be probably part of the transaction. So OEM parts in the current catalog that have turned, the part number has turned in the last 12 months. That's typically what you find in the buy sell transactions. If they don't do that, then they do an independent parts appraisal. Someone will come in on a weekend, and typically the cost of that is split between the buyer and the seller, but everything's under negotiation. And after all, this is a car deal, right? But that's how we handle parts. And the other one that comes up, the next one, I guess, is the FFE. We talked about FFE
Oh, wait, Hal,
furniture.
before we
Yeah,
jump off parts,
sure.
let's talk about two other things. Dealers always ask me about, you mentioned before, the obsolescence. What do I do? Do I have to buy these old parts? Do I have to do this? You don't have to, but my recommendation is negotiate. A dealer may have parts that are 10, 15 years old, good for restoration projects. You give them a penny on a dollar, give them whatever you think is reasonable for you, because he has nowhere else to go with these parts. He's going to end up trying to sell them on the open market to whoever wants to buy, like Hal said, a 1975 Maverick bumper. Well, you know what? That can go on eBay and sell for $100. So don't be afraid of the obsolescence. Don't be afraid of the parts that have been there for a while. Negotiate a deal if you think you have a market for them or could have a market for them. And again, if you get them for the right price, it's worth putting them in your garage, your storage bin, or whatever, and then see what happens. There are also odd lotters out there that will buy up bulk parts like that. And like I said, put them on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or whatever. So don't be afraid if there's parts sitting there that the owner wants you to take. That's a negotiation point. Negotiate for the obsolescence or the old parts. Now,
Yeah.
I think Hal mentioned something when we talk about dealer always asks, well, can I send back current parts to the manufacturer and get credit for them? There are some manufacturers that will let you do that. that in the part of the buy sell agreement or whatever, you're going to ask the manufacturer to take back current inventory during this buy sell. Some of the manufacturers say no, that's part of the buy sell. You have to take all current inventory, and you need the inventory anyway. Because the first thing the manufacturer is going to do, guys, is as soon as you get that franchise, they're going to load you up with parts that are missing out of your inventory. They know what's in your inventory, especially if it's current, not obsolescence. And if it's current inventory, they know what you have in stock because every time you sell one, the manufacturer knows. And usually within a week or so, automatically, that part shows back up in your inventory because they ship it to you.
Yeah.
Almost all manufacturers do that. And again, it's a way of doing business. Does it help the dealer? Yeah, it sometimes does because you don't have to necessarily worry about, keeping your inventory up to date because the manufacturer or the parts manager for the manufacturer, the OEM, will handle some of that.
Yeah. The other thing I'd mention is Greg said it doesn't have to be an old, slow moving part. There are a lot of dealers that carry non OEM type parts. I mean, winches and bull bars and roll bars and all types of accessories and different types of floor mats and that's got value. So and that's normally something that you want to have and you want to pay for it, but it comes down to negotiation. Don't necessarily because it's not a no OEM part dismiss it because it does
Right.
have value.
Yeah,
Yeah.
along those same lines as Hal just mentioned, if you have a body shop or your dealership, the dealership has a body shop affiliated with it or attached, those parts are important. They could be very important. The other thing is, don't forget that you are also a used car dealer. Used car dealers
Good point.
needs brakes. They need this, they need that. Because I just had a dealer out in Long Island who had, God, thousands of brake pads, brake shoes, rotors, all this for all kinds of cars. And he was a European dealer, but he had all this American stuff in stock and he wanted to sell it. That had value, especially in the used car market. So is it hard to inventory? Sure it is. That's why Hal mentioned hire the right person, hire the inventory controller who will come in, count every single part, give you a list, put it on a computer for you, a zip drive, and you'll be able to know exactly what you're buying or what you're not buying. And don't be afraid to tell the dealer that you don't want certain things. What he's going to do is just turn around and again sell them on another way or another to another dealer or back to a used car lot or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's good points. Oh, should we move on?
Absolutely.
Okay. FFE. I was getting into this. Let me just remember furniture, fixtures, and equipment, FFE for short. This is another a little bit of a negotiation. Typically, they'll go on at acquisition costs and then the dealer will depreciate those, right? To lower his tax obligation. So typically when you look at a dealership statement, the book value on these types of things will be zero, but we know that there's a market value to these things. I typically use about 50% of original acquisition cost as the guide for FFE, right? Now these are tables, the conference tables, the salesperson's desk, the computers, the shop lifts, the diagnostic equipment, all of this stuff has value, right? It may show zero on the balance sheet because it's been fully depreciated, but it's got value. So if it's $1 million of original acquisition cost, then I'll typically, when I price a store, I'll typically say 500,000, figuring that there's at least 50% useful life left in this equipment. But it does come down to a negotiation. And it can be another item that gets independently appraised if the buyer and the seller can't agree on the value. But as Greg knows, we've done a lot of these things. The small stores are kind of 200 to 300,000 for equipment. I mean, we know this. You can spend a lot of money on appraisal, but it's going to come in to that kind of range. Medium stores are 300 to 400, and then the metros, especially with body shops, can be 450, 500, 600,000, even more. Number of stalls, look at the number of stalls and you'll get an idea in the shop what kind of FFE value you're looking at, right?
Yeah, and again, remember that FFA is value. It is actually something that you could possibly borrow against, or a bank will look at this and say, this is an asset. So you have a $500,000 spray booth. Well, that's an asset. And maybe a bank will be willing to give you X number of dollars on a loan because you have $1 million worth of real assets instead of, again, blue sky stuff. These are
Yeah.
real assets.
Right. Right.
The other thing I wanted to mention, Hal mentioned it briefly, but if that dealership has a body shop, fantastic. Another whole set of rules concerning that. Maybe down the road, we'll talk about body shops in one of our podcasts, but not today because it's a whole subject that I love by myself having run, my restoration shop and everything else. So I love that subject. Hal, I know that our next subject is real estate, but I think we're running a little fast on time, which is good. We
Yeah.
may have to do real estate another day, but I do think we should get into used car inventory and new car vehicles because we got about 10 minutes left. And we can
Okay.
cover, I think, those two subjects.
Yeah.
And let's do real estate next week.
Yeah, real estate is another completely separate entity. Could be a purchase, could be a lease. We'll talk all about real estate and that in the next broadcast. The last couple of sections that we'll talk about are we'll start with used vehicles. Again, value, right? Typically, used vehicles are floor planned, so there's a debt obligation associated with this asset. And what you typically find is that the used vehicles are not included in the dealership pricing, but they are a part of the sale, but they're independently negotiated, right? So they're bought on what I call buyer option. The buyer's got the option to buy the used vehicle inventory, take it off of the seller's floor plan and put it on their floor plan that they arrange at a mutually agreeable price. And how do you determine that? Well, they look at the guidebooks. They look at the Manheim Market Review Report or Kelly Blue Book or whatever they decide. If the buyer and the seller agree on that price, then that vehicle gets sold with the store and gets transferred from one floor plan to the other. If they don't, the seller retains the ownership of that vehicle and has to sell it, to retail it before closing or wholesale it or dispose of it some other way. So that's used vehicles. I don't know if you want to add anything to that,
Yeah, the,
Greg.
the only thing I want to add, just for half a second, is that closely look at these inventories. Sometimes there's bargains here, and sometimes it's a money pit that you want nothing to do with. But if the dealer has you may be skilled at work trucks, and the dealer has a bunch of them and never really figured out how to sell them. So he may be willing to let those go at a much less than market value. So there's opportunities always in used vehicles. And then there's also used vehicles that we call them, as everybody knows, the guy is buried in. Bought
Yeah.
them wrong, marketed them wrong, held them too long, didn't depreciate them down. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
Run away. Run
They're
away
on the
from those
floor.
vehicles.
Yeah. They're on the floor plan for 25 and the market value is 20, right?
Right.
So the guy's $5,000, what we call upside down, and you walk away from that and the seller's got to figure out how to dispose of that vehicle because the buyer's not going to buy
Right.
a $20,000 car for $25,000.
And at times, Hal and I are working against each other, but my philosophy is wait to the last second of the purchase because at that point, the dealer may be tired. He just may want to get rid of these things. He may just want to hand you the keys and walk away. There may be a buying opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and then on the other hand, it may be just the opposite where he has a friend waiting. If you don't want these cars, this guy's coming with his tractor trailer to pick them all up. So be very careful. It's
And
definitely a
remember, these
negotiation.
dealers often have other stores, so they just they move the inventory to another location or whatever. I have had the panic sales though. Oh my gosh, closings in 4 days, and I've got these 6 cars left, and what am I going to do? And as Greg said, the buyer can pick up a good deal if they wait the guy out.
Yeah, and again, the Hal just mentioned, I had 14 stores that I was running. Every week, I would have a new front line on my used car lot. And people, where are you getting these cars from? Well, I got these cars from was one of the other stores. So when the car hit 30 or 45 days, I would then shift it to another store. And all of a sudden, this store has a fresh line of used cars, even though I've had them for 30 days plus. So every store every week would have what appeared to be a fresh line of cars so that people riding by see something different and special. So that's a practice too.
Sure. Sure.
Last thing out, new vehicles. We got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah. So very similar to used, the new vehicles are going to be floor planned mostly. I had one dealer owned his new vehicles. It was like more of a bank than a dealership, but most of these used vehicle or new vehicles are floor planned, and those are sold at invoice less the factory incentives, right? So a dealer will have collected the whole back, for example, and will have to pass that whole back on to the buyers so that that inventory is on market, so to speak, so that it's competitive with the other dealers that have those kinds of vehicles in stock. So it's invoice less the factory incentives, and it moves from, one floor plan to another floor plan. Typically, if it's Ford credit, it'll go to another Ford credit line, a separate line, but it'll be bought at that negotiated price. And there's typically mileage, if it's under 300 miles, it's considered new. And if it's considered, 3 to 5, it's a demo. And there's certain different price bands that can kind of get negotiated with depending on the mileage of the new vehicle that's never been licensed.
And that is going to be I think, another whole show for us, and that's financing. Getting financing to, number one, buy the store, buy the property, getting a floor plan line, whether from the manufacturer, and the manufacturers usually offer. They have a resource within their own entity that takes care of all the banking responsibilities for franchise dealers. Or else you can go outside and find maybe a better deal with a bank that's willing to loan you money and hold your line of credit for your vehicles, new and used. So that's another whole subject that we'll be talking about in an upcoming podcast.
Yeah. Just be careful with that because the banks can kind of run hot and cold, right? So they'll be really hot and offer you great interest rates and great deals. And then when the economy starts to weaken a little bit, or there's some tariffs that are put on, or whatever goes on with the macroeconomic picture, then they get less and less aggressive. So what you'll find over the long term is the factory captive finance sources, the Ford credits, the General Motors holdings, etc., they exist to support the sale of the products that the vehicle divisions manufacture. And you're gonna get deeper retail buying when you wholesale with the captive with that too. So there's a lot of, as Greg said, that's a whole
Absolutely.
nother kettle of fish that we'll have to get into
Yeah.
at some other
And
point.
that's going to be a full half hour. We could talk about, independent banks. We can talk about the captives. We can talk about, even now it's been around for a while. You go to Deieso, you go to some of the auctions, and all of a sudden the auctions are offering flooring on those vehicles as well. All of which that's what Hal and I do. We fashion a business plan for you, one from column A, one from column B, and we figure it all out for you. Your best options, your best opportunities. You're not alone in this. And that's the one thing I wanted to mention before we're just about ready to close up today. Please subscribe. The newsletter is worth every second of your reading for us because we go a little bit in depth about this. If you're thinking about selling your franchise, give us a call. We'll start the process for you. If you're thinking about buying a franchise, give us a call. We'll start that process for you. You're not alone in this whole thing. It could be a very tricky, interesting adventure for you. And we want to try to make it as easy as possible. So go to YouTube, listen to this podcast, subscribe with us. We'll start getting our YouTube subscription emails and blasts out to you, our newsletter out to you. And again, I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to start some live broadcasts, Hal.
I hope so.
Any
Yeah,
idea who we want to
I'd love
bring
to
on
love
as
to
our
take some
guest
live
speakers?
questions. Be great.
Guest speakers, any ideas?
We got a bunch of them lined up. So yeah.
I know we have one of the best attorneys in the country, automotive, and he's very, very anxious to come on and answer your questions. We have some banking people too, which is appropriate for the timing that we have.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think we are just about finished with our podcast today.
Yeah. Thanks. Another power packed session here. Again, I'll just close with this. It's very complex. Don't do this alone. Get a voice of experience to help you through valuing your store and think about all the little intricacies that go into that. And we'll join you next time out. We're going to be talking about understanding dealership real estate, a big value component in the sale of the business, right?
And again, realize that Hal and I are car guys. We've been doing it for over 40 years each. Be careful who you're talking to. Be careful who you sign up with, whether it's a real estate agent or some sort of broker. Just be careful. The car business, as you guys know, is very, very intricate. It's very difficult. It's very profitable. But at the same time, you need the right team. And hopefully, we hope you consider us as we get going in your quest for either a buy or sell.
Yep,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Hal.
All right. Thanks, Greg.